Hi everyone, welcome to English Digest. I'm Pat.
And I'm Erin.
So we're looking at our news digest for this month, and it's all about lab-grown meat. How do you feel about the idea of lab-grown meat?
I feel like you can put it in my belly.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, so you're complete. If someone said this meat is not from an animal, it was grown in a science lab, you'd be like, yep, fine, no problem.
I'd actually probably prefer it. I feel like it's a more sustainable option for our Earth.
Absolutely,
and,
yeah.
I am not opposed to it whatsoever. I would probably look into the way it was grown, where it was grown. I'd probably look into the science part of it a little bit before I ate it, but yes, I'd probably prefer.
Yeah, as somebody who does not eat meat because he doesn't like the flavor of meat, I probably wouldn't eat it.
Right.
Except for the fact that, like eating snake or crocodile, it's something unusual enough that I'd probably give it a try.
Try it, yeah.
I probably wouldn't like it, but I would try it. So now, one of the problems with this idea of lab-grown meat is people think of the idea and they think, oh, no, I don't want that.
Oh, that's weird.
That's
Ooh.
messing with science. That's not how it should be. And so what this news article is about is a new way of looking at doing lab-grown meat in maybe a way that makes people kind of think differently about the idea. So let's read through the article, find out what it's all about. A Japanese startup has come up with a novel approach to creating lab-grown meat. While the idea of growing meat in laboratories has been around for decades, it's only in recent times that the technology for doing so has become available. Shojin Meat, a food company based in Tokyo, is taking things in a new direction. In addition to experimenting with different kinds of materials and technologies, Shojin Meat is enabling high school students to try out the process at home. The students are given some animal cells and a microwave-sized incubating machine, while they use energy drinks to provide food for the growing cells. With the result ending up a slimy mass, the final product is more like pate than a steak or a burger. The real goal behind this experiment is to create a sense of educational curiosity among the students and to diminish prejudices against cultured meat. Lab-grown meat is seen as an alternative to meat produced by traditional agricultural methods. It has almost no environmental impact compared to these practices, which have been linked to deforestation and climate change. However, lab-grown meat is expensive. So far, a 200-gram cultured meat burger costs around $2,000 to produce. Scientists are trying to refine the process to bring down costs, but as the field is new and there are no experts, getting funding is difficult. Some people also object to lab-grown meat for the same reasons they oppose genetically modified food. It's considered unnatural and potentially dangerous. This is why Shojin Meat's efforts to make the idea acceptable to younger generations are important. While there's still plenty of work to do, Shojin Meat's approach makes the idea of culturing our own meat at home not quite so far-fetched.
Okay, welcome back. So we're talking about lab-grown meat. Now, this isn't just any lab-grown meat, it's Japan's new approach to lab-grown meat. An approach is a method of doing something or a way of sort of dealing with a problem or an issue that some people might not know what's going on with. So we've been talking about lab-grown meat for a few years now, and we've been talking about how to make it, what to think of it,
how much it costs.
All these things. And Japan's sort of come up with a new idea because it is very controversial. They've kind of got a new idea to sort of teach people about lab-grown meat and kind of give them their chance to make it themselves.
Yeah, which is a great way to take away some of the sort of fear and idea of the, it's evil scientists in some crazy castle on a hill making fake meat or something.
That doesn't usually happen, just so you know, guys.
Yeah, just so you know. Okay, so the Japan or the Japanese group in question is a startup. Now, a startup, which can be either two words hyphenated or just one word, startup. This is short for a startup company, which is a small new business in a kind of fast-growing business area that has an interesting and usually innovative idea for meeting a market need.
Right.
So these groups start off usually very small and develop very kind of efficiently and sort of create and develop their own things as they go along.
Right. Something that's interesting. A lot of the smartphone apps that you guys probably used all started as startups. So
Yes.
Instagram and Facebook, and you can go and research their histories and realize that they used to just be really small companies with 5 or 6 people and one computer in a room. And it's interesting how they start very small and they often find investors really quickly, especially if they're technology, and they just grow and grow and grow until they're
huge, like Facebook and Instagram.
Yeah, okay, so this Japanese startup has come up with a novel approach to creating lab-grown meat. Now, you might usually recognize the word novel as a noun, a book, something like that, but here we're using it as an adjective, and it means not like anything known before. So it kind of describes something that you don't know much about. It's very new. It's probably unusual or interesting as well. It's kind of got this thing where you go, oh, okay.
Oh, that's different.
I like that idea.
That's different. That's new. Okay, and so they're going about this new approach to lab-grown meat. Now, the lab in lab-grown meat, we sort of explain here in the next sentence. We say, while the idea of growing meat in laboratories has been around for decades, it's only in recent times that the technology for doing so has become available. So, laboratory, or as I've been sort of saying in outtakes, laboratory, because that's another way of pronouncing it. Most people just say lab. It's much easier. Laboratory, laboratory, it's all lab. It's just a place where you do science, basically.
Right.
There are scientific equipment, there are scientific chemicals. It could be chemical lab, it could be a physics lab with things that sort of show very small particles. It could be more biological with sort of living things growing in it.
Cut open some frogs.
Yeah, any kind of place that's where scientific activity goes on.
Right. You can have math labs as well.
Yeah, I get cooking labs.
Yeah,
cooking labs as well for sort of preparing stuff. So this idea has been around. People have actually thought of it as far back as, like, I think the Second World War. People were thinking maybe we can think of a way to solve hunger problems by growing our own meat.
Right.
But we just haven't had the technology to do it until in recent times. As science has improved, machines have improved, knowledge has improved. Now we've got the technology to actually grow meat in a lab or laboratory or laboratory.
Okay, well, the company that's doing it, this startup company, is called Shojin Meat. They're based in Tokyo. That means you can find their office in Tokyo to be based somewhere. Sort of another way of saying to be located somewhere. That's where your main office is, at least. Is taking things in a new direction. And we're going to talk about that new direction here in the second paragraph, which starts by saying, in addition to experimenting with different kinds of materials and technologies, Shojin Meat is enabling high school students to try out their process at home. So first we learned that in their lab or their laboratory, they're sort of trying different tests. They're doing different experiments, like what does this kind of material come out like? What does this look like?
What if we feed it with this? Thinking about the right temperatures. How can we change the texture? And a lot of this is down at the level of the genetics and molecules in the meat to try and get it to grow right. So it gets pretty sciencey. So that's one side of it. And the other side is actually letting high school kids just do it and grow their own at home.
Sounds really cool.
Yeah,
I would do it too.
Totally done that. So the students are given some animal cells because that's basically what everything has to start out as
a cell.
You need to start out with at least a few animal cells or things that have been made to look like animal cells.
Right.
And then but rather than letting them grow up into an animal, you just grow the meat. So they get the cells. They're given a microwave-sized incubating machine. So something about the size of a normal microwave, so easy to have in the home. And it's an incubating machine. Now, to incubate, this is quite a scientific term, and it means to keep eggs or cells or kind of bacteria or little things like that.
Things that can grow.
Yeah, and keep them in the right conditions for growth. So usually that means keeping the right temperature, usually making sure they have the right kind of food to grow with, making sure they're not contaminated or infected with other bacteria, that sort of thing.
Right.
In science labs at university, I incubated all sorts of things to see what kind of stuff grew, bacteria, viruses, all that sort of stuff.
Right.
And the food in this case is explained as they're using energy drinks for food. So energy drinks is
Red Bull?
Kind of, yeah. Red Bull, or maybe even something like Pocari Sweat or Super Supao. The kind of stuff you take to sort of give yourself either a bit of energy and sugar and the right mix of body chemicals that your body needs when you've been sweating and exercising that help these actual animal cells grow because it contains all the nutrients.
Okay. Just one more note about the word incubate. One way that I think about incubate is I remember when I was a kid, I used to watch this video. I would see this video on TV where someone would be raising chickens or hens, and then the hen lays an egg.
Yes.
And what they do is they take the eggs and they put it in this machine, and the eggs stay in this warm machine, and it kind of like, I don't know if this is really how it happened. This was a long time ago, but I almost remember it sort of glowing with heat, and then a couple of weeks later, the little chicks pop out.
Yes.
Yeah. So.
And kind of basically, women are natural incubators when they are pregnant.
If you think about it that way.
They provide the right temperature, the right conditions, and all the food. So, we have growing cells, but what does it look like when it comes out?
Oh, okay. Well, it doesn't sound great here. That's because the sentence says, with the result ending up a slimy mass. The final product is more like pate than a steak or a burger. Now, some kind of a icky description here. A slimy mass. Something that's slimy is covered with slime. Now, slime is sort of a substance that's very wet or slippery. It can sometimes be really thick. It's not a thing that you like to touch.
No.
So, like, if say you're in a forest and you are sitting down on a bench.
Yes.
And it's been kind of raining in this forest, and there's stuff growing on the forest, and you touch the bench and you just put your hand in wet stuff.
Yeah, kind of wet, a little slippery, sometimes a little sticky.
Yeah, it's gross.
Yeah, and it's a slimy mass, so it doesn't even have a shape. It's just kind of a lump it's kind of a liquidy lump. So the way I think of it is, imagine that you've just sort of mixed a bunch of not even just flour and water, but it's just mixed up and it's just a splat.
Do you know what makes me think of a slimy mass?
Yeah.
Oyster omelets.
Yeah, something a bit like, oyster omelets coming out.
That's a slimy mass.
And it's described as more like pate than a steak or burger. So you don't grow it and you get, okay, we've grown it. Ding, the microwave is done. And you take out a burger patty or, a nice juicy steak. No, it's more like pate, which is this kind of rich, savory paste. And you make it from really finely mincing and chopping up and mashing ingredients together, usually meat or fish, but you can make it out of vegetable stuff.
I have to be honest, I have never had pate.
You've not?
I haven't.
Okay. I have plenty in France and in Europe. It's it's not uncommon. Certainly in France, they make a lot of pate out of goose liver and other parts of hens and stuff.
In like middle-class Canada, it's not a very popular food.
What about in Quebec, the French-speaking area?
Maybe, but I mean, I would have gone there on holidays.
Okay. Okay, so it's not great. We end up with a bit of a slimy pate mass than an actual piece of meat, but that's not the real point of why Shojin Meat is doing this. Right. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Right now, we're going to take a short break.
right, welcome back. So we're about to find out what the real goal Shojin Meat has with these incubating machines and this sort of experiment that high school students can do. So it says here the real goal behind this experiment is to create a sense of educational curiosity among the students and to diminish prejudices against cultured meat. So let's talk about this sense of educational curiosity first. Curiosity is just the desire to know more about something. So if you sort of see or hear about a subject on TV, maybe you see this documentary about a war and you don't know anything about it and you say, wow, that sounds interesting. I'm going to go learn about it. You have a curiosity about that thing. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to get students to want to learn more about this sort of science experiment and kind of the science behind it.
Yeah, and in doing so, they'll diminish prejudices against cultured meat. To diminish something is to make it smaller or weaker. It's just not as strong anymore. And a prejudice is a kind of where you don't like something, but without really having a strong reason for it. You just like, I don't like those things just because I don't like those things.
Right.
So people don't like the idea of lab-grown meat because of the sort of idea of crazy science and is it safe and it's not natural. Kind of, we mentioned that. So
it's one thing we should mention. I mean, I don't like mushrooms, but I wouldn't say I have a prejudice against mushrooms.
You wouldn't like, if you saw me eating them, you wouldn't like smash them off my plate and say, don't touch those things.
Yeah, they're awful. But it's more things to do with like, it's very often used with things like race or gender or something
countries,
like serious issues like that.
Yeah, and people do get pretty serious about this kind of, this is unnatural, this is absolutely wrong. It's not just like disgusting, it's morally wrong to have cultured meat. Cultured just means it's grown in a lab. To culture something means you grow it in a lab.
That's another very scientific term there.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's find out more about why people are so interested in growing meat in a lab. And one of the reasons is that it's an alternative to meat produced by traditional agricultural methods. Now, agricultural is related to agriculture, which is the science of farming. So if you are driving in the countryside and you see a big farm, you know that land is used for agriculture. Now, agricultural methods, traditional agricultural methods at least, are
cows on a farm.
Cows on a farm and other sort of farming methods like planting seeds in a field and that sort of thing.
So this is an alternative. An alternative is something that's, we don't do this, we do this instead. So instead of having meat from real cows in real farms, we can grow it in a lab. And one reason why it's seen as a positive alternative, it has no or almost no environmental impact compared to these practices. So an impact is a powerful or major influence or effect on something. And so growing meat in a lab, the only way it's affecting the environment is that you'll need to use some electricity to kind of fuel the various incubators and stuff.
And clean up
and
after
a few
yourself.
things like that. So that's almost none compared to agricultural methods, which involves using lots of land, which involves lots of waste, water. And as the article says, agricultural methods and practices have been linked to deforestation, so cutting down trees to make room for farmland, and climate change, because no trees means less oxygen, less cleaning up the atmosphere.
Different
water, water coming and washing through with the animals' chemicals that are put on the plants, or animal leavings goes into the rivers and streams, and all that kind of thing causes pollution, causes climate change.
I have to say, I feel like I've witnessed climate change happen in Taiwan.
Yes.
A lot when I first got here years and years and years ago. Rainy seasons and typhoons happened at a certain time of year, and now they happen later and later.
They do.
Yeah, so I feel like that's an effect of climate change that I've noticed. But there's another thing we need to know about lab-grown meat. So it's better for the environment, but it's still quite expensive. In fact, a 200-gram cultured meat burger that's not big costs around $2,000 US to produce. So 200 grams, $2,000. That's
no one's going to pay that much for a burger in a McDonald's.
No. I mean, if I had all the money in the world, I'd probably pay that to eat that burger just to see what it was like. But
yes, so therefore, at the moment, we can't replace burgers and steaks with lab-grown meat. It's just far too expensive.
Right.
So scientists are trying to refine the process to bring down costs. To refine something means to make it better, to make it more accurate, to kind of keep making small changes, and each change improves the overall process. You can pronounce it both ways, and just make it better, make it less expensive, make it more efficient, and so on. And all of that will bring down the costs. If they're using fewer materials, they're growing it quicker, they're growing it with just the minimum they need, that will mean the meat is less expensive. A problem with this is the field is new. Now, here when we say field, we mean the area of scientific knowledge.
Right, the study of it.
Yes,
yeah.
So it's physics is one sort of field with other smaller fields. Chemistry is another field and so on. Environmental science is a field of science. So the field is new. This lab-grown meat area of knowledge is new. And there are no experts. There are no people who've been doing it for like 50 years and they've got lots of research papers and they know all about it. And that means that getting funding is difficult because you're not saying, well, based on this research, we can guarantee this will happen. You have to say, we're hoping this will happen.
Right.
And it's harder then for governments and big organizations to go, oh, sure, here's all the money you need.
Right.
They're going to go, well, how do you know it's even going to work?
We just want to know how you're going to spend our money. Like,
yes.
Are we going to get anything from this? So, yeah, they're not having an easy time finding investors for something like this. I think it's getting easier as we go along. But
there is another problem, which we sort of mentioned about when we talked about prejudices.
Yes. Okay. So here the problem is some people also object to lab-grown meat for the same reason they oppose genetically modified food. It's considered unnatural and potentially dangerous. Now, a lot to look at in that sentence. First, let's look at the phrase object to. When you object to something, you say that you don't approve of it or you don't like it, I guess. I object to your idea. I don't like your idea. So they object to this lab-grown meat. They don't like it. And that's because they oppose genetically modified food. Now, genetically modified food we often say is GMO. When you modify something, you make small changes to it to improve it in some way, to make it more effective. It's kind of like saying refined, but there you're keeping the same system, just making it better. When you modify something, you actually change something to make it better.
That's right.
Yeah.
And to do this genetically means to basically get it in a lab and modify its genes. The genes are your building blocks of your body. They are the code that tells your body what to make, how to grow, and so on. So if you genetically modify something, you go, well, why don't we make it stronger or bigger? Why don't we make it able to resist a particular disease? Why don't we make it so it's going to produce the most amount of fruit? And so they change some of the genes to make it a little bit stronger, a little bit better. Now, people oppose this. They say, okay, if I'm against that, I don't like that, I'm on the other side. If someone says, yeah, go for it, I say, no, don't do it.
Right.
And the reason they say they don't like this kind of genetically modified food, it's considered unnatural and it's not a naturally growing plant if humans have gone in there and changed some stuff. And therefore, it's potentially dangerous. Potentially means possibly, and we're not quite sure. Now, of course, scientists aren't going to take food and plants and animals and put some kind of horrible poison in the genes.
No.
So they're not going to be like, you eat the genetically modified food and the next day you're dying.
Or you're an alien or something
or it
like
changes
that.
your own genetics. That's not how it works.
Right.
What the problem is at the moment there are not many long-term studies to show the long-term 20, 30 years down the line to be if there is anything that could change over time that we're not ready for.
One thing that I do find interesting is that humans have been modifying food for years and years and years, hundreds of years.
Yes, now, exactly. For an example, if we want to get really big, delicious cows, we get the biggest cow and the biggest bull and make them have babies.
Right.
That is, in a very small, low-tech way, that is genetic modification.
Right.
Working out which plants grow the best and all right, I'll cut a bit off that plant, plant it again, and so another healthy plant will grow. That's a kind of genetic modification.
It's sort of like you're instead of letting the plants grow naturally, you're just picking the best plants, taking all the rest away,
yes.
and then
you only have good plants from now on. Now, people are okay with that.
Yeah.
I do, to a certain extent, understand where they're coming from. I am a scientist. I think genetically modified food is fine.
Me too.
I do agree that, yeah, maybe in order to get it accepted, you do need, many, many years of study data to give long-term possible effects, but that's no reason why we shouldn't be experimenting and trying these things out.
Right. I think actually one of the big problems people have with genetically modified food is the business practices some of the companies do when they're making it.
Yeah, they're not exactly always honest about it,
No.
and they will sometimes throw money at a study and then kind of, okay, we've paid a lot for this, it better pass.
Right.
So it's not pure science, pure kind of real research. But anyway, this is why this opposition, these people who object to it, this is why Shoujin's efforts to make the idea, so that's the idea of lab-grown meat, acceptable to younger generations are important. Because if kids grow up with it, they'll think, okay, growing meat in a lab, okay, it's kind of slimy, but it's normal. It's not scary. It's not strange. So when I'm older, maybe I will, approve of that and I won't object to it and will help make it more common. Yeah. And that'll be better for the environment overall.
Right. Now, of course, this is almost not a brand new study or field of study, but it's very new in terms of modern science. There is still plenty of work to do. We have a long way to go. But this new approach of looking at lab-grown meat or culturing our own meat, kind of like growing it ourselves, it sort of makes this field not so far-fetched.
Yeah.
Now, far-fetched is something that's extremely unlikely to be true or to happen. So if you think about flying cars, they might still be a little far-fetched.
Yeah, I can't really imagine a world with flying cars, but maybe one day.
Maybe a couple hundred years in the future it will be more likely, but cultured meat for probably our parents would have been an idea that was
from a science fiction movie or novel. That's
kind of crazy.
They would think, no, we'll never do something like that.
Yeah.
But for us, that seems like, that could be possible. They're already doing some of it. It could happen on an industrial factory-size scale. So that's not far-fetched, that kind of thing. So there you go. That's the general idea. We sort of make the idea of lab-grown meat more normal, more something that can be understood and dealt with, and then hopefully that will stop people opposing it for reasons that aren't scientific. If people are going to oppose something, have logic and science and facts and reason to back that up. Not just, it's unnatural and I'm scared.
Yeah. Okay, well, if you guys get to grow your own meat, feel free to send us an email and let us know how it goes.
Yeah, we'd be interested to know what it tastes like, amongst other questions.
Like.
But we're out of time for today. Thanks for listening to our News Digest article for this month. For English Digest, I'm Pat.
And I'm Erin.
We'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.